to popeyJN Radio, bringing you the best that YouTube has to offer in terms of original and cover music. Tonight we have a very, very special edition of popeyJN Radio. I've been looking forward to this for about a month. I'm not even joking right now. This is the Gabriel Lynch Power Hour, and tonight's guest, Gabriel Lynch.
Hi, how you going, mate?
Very good, how are you?
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So your music tends to be a little bit more on the darker subjects of life. If that's not, too ominous to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
no, look, I mean, I guess I always tend to think of it as more songs that, well, they may tackle sort of darker subjects in some ways. Not all of them. I mean, I'm certainly not above writing a love song or that kind of thing either, but I like to insert sort of a bit of hope into anything I do. So even if it's tackling something that's dark, it's never sort of, for the sake of being bleak. It's always with the idea that, people listening to that sort of music might take away the feeling that they're not alone, whether they're going through something similar or they just relate to the emotion behind the song or whatever it may be. But yeah, no, I certainly agree. It can be a little bit darker in subject, that's for sure.
Yeah, so just with being an artist right now, can you just give us a little bit of insight of what it's like to be an artist in 2016, having to deal with the kind of digital age that we live in? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been I've been doing it for a very long time. So, I mean, I got serious about performing and playing my own music when I was very young. So I started playing in bars and stuff when I was like 13. So, I mean, for me, I've kind of grown up with that slow transition from, I guess, the days of, record labels selling CDs in CD stores, bands, getting signed to big deals and then touring. And, I guess what's sort of happened now, a lot of people say that the digital age means that it's a much more sort of democratic sort of scene for independent artists insofar as anyone can get their music up online. You can make your music accessible to the whole world. And of course, that has a lot of great benefits. It means that people are able to get their music to more people than perhaps ever before, and they can do that without necessarily needing, $1 million behind them. But the fallout is that there is just so much. There's so much going on. There's so many artists releasing music that the real struggle that I, along with everybody else doing this, would face is getting discovered, having people actually find them, and giving people an excuse to investigate, my music as compared to the millions of other artists out there. So I mean, it has got its pros, it's got its cons.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, for me, I find it to be very exciting. I think the fact that you can get your music to that many people, and it can then be used to bolster the things that I still think are the most important for budding indie artists, which for me is performances. I as much as I can send out, music on YouTube and Spotify or whatever platform and hope people might pay attention to it, I still find that the greatest opportunity to get people behind me and my music is still when I'm performing to them in a room.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just look at the digital side of things as a way to really kind of reinforce that. So yeah, look, I mean, good and bad, but I mean, I think it's always been the same. There's always been hardships, and there's always been benefits to being an artist in any generation, in any period of time. But right now is a great time for people to be creating, and I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. So just going off of that a little bit, with the internet and the way that the internet is piracy also a very kind of big issue in the music industry? Like, from your perspective with your music, putting it up online on Spotify, on iTunes, all these kind of YouTube and all these places, does it open yourself up to a little bit more of that kind of piracy kind of side of it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I suppose it does. I mean, I don't think I'm at a level now just yet where there's potentially really enough interest in trying to steal my music for anything menacing. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, as long as I recall, there's been means by which people have been able to share music, or pirate it, whether that was, recording songs on a cassette player off the radio, burning CDs, It certainly makes it again a bit easier because again the reach of the music when it is online is so much broader.
Yeah.
And of course, even just the fact that if you put a song on YouTube, even before the fact that people can so easily rip that music themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
the music is there. It's ready to be listened to by anyone at any time, and there's no sort of stream of real revenue from that. I mean, unless you're talking about millions and millions of hits.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess in a way that's why I think of it. I think most artists like myself would be looking at what's online again as bolstering the other means of making our living and supporting our art. For me, it's performing. So I think of it as a way to get people interested in my music, so that perhaps if I then go to their city, put on a show, someone might be more inclined to pay a fee to actually come and see the show.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's the other side of it too, which is people who want to actually feel like they belong to it. So I mean, buying a record, or I sell USBs nowadays because a lot of people don't have CD players. But
Yeah.
buying the USB, having I guess that memento of the performance. But again, I sell a lot more of those when I'm on a gig than I ever would dream to online. But then I guess the other thing is that now with the rise of things like Spotify, which although a lot of larger artists are not super happy about the revenue distribution scheme for Spotify, an artist like myself, I see it as a great thing. If I do happen to have a song that picks up and gets a bit of traction, at least it's got enough of a usership to perhaps give me some kind of revenue from that as well. But like I said, it's not ever going to be my main concern. It's more, I think if people really believe in you as an artist, they'll find other ways to support you, and just that bare bones of coming to a performance is always the very, very best thing for somebody in my position.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna move on to the first song that we have here. Like Crows. This is from your Dependent State album?
Yep.
Yeah, so can you just talk us through a little bit of what was going on in your life that kind of inspired you to kind of write this song?
Yeah, right. Well, I used to date a girl who was going through a pretty troublesome time. She was living kind of a double life. So she had on one side her life as seen through the eyes of her family. So she came from a pretty large community in Melbourne. Like, of course, anyone who hasn't been to Melbourne may already know this, but Melbourne's obviously very multicultural. But a very rich, a rich tapestry of different cultures, and on the most part, there's a huge amount of emphasis placed on people, getting on together and assimilating together. But of course, just through the sheer happenstance of it, there are a lot of groups and communities, whether they're sort of, interwoven through, faith or religious groups or other things like they've migrated at similar times or whatever the case may be. But in this case, we're talking about a girl who belonged to one such community, who had certain expectations placed upon her about what she would do with her life, what kind of people she would be mingling with. And it so happened that dating me, belonging not to her faith, to her ethnicity, not having a doctor or a lawyer's degree, and I mean, I guess being a musician basically was probably one of the biggest nails in the coffin, but that was something that she could never reveal to them. But what ended up happening in the end was that there was I guess, a big conflict, because at a certain point she was discovered. And she had to kind of make a choice about what she wanted to do with her life. Now, it wasn't just about our relationship, and I don't want to dumb it down to that, because there were a lot of things, everything in her life had to be in some way approved by her parents and other members of the community that she belonged to. But I guess at a certain point she also had a lot of aspirations of her own and a lot of things that she wanted to pursue, and she had to kind of make a call. So the song was written about that, and I tried to utilize rhythm to kind of tell that story. So there's actually a polyrhythm that goes on throughout the song, meaning there's two separate time signatures running at the same time. So on the one side you have this rhythm that's based in a 5 feel, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and another rhythm that runs underneath it that's based in a 4 feel. And the idea was to use that rhythm to talk about that duplicity she was experiencing. And I guess for me, the 4 feel, which is what most songs are in, the most common time signature in pop music, is very underlying. It gets lost at times, but if you listen very carefully, you can hear it. So for me, that was almost like her listening to what her instinct and what her heart was telling her. So that's what I tried to accomplish anyway with Like Crows.
Fantastic. All right, so this is for you guys. This is Like Crows.
From your perch, you'd ended your tireless search. You once had your doubts, but now you have found me out. It seems so absurd, but we never spoke a word. Oh, why can't you see that you don't know me? How grand the morning, how bright was the day when you took what you had and you threw it away to the crows. How great the fortune that cannot be sold, and how ageless you feel now that you're growing old like the crows. Quite a cage when you tried to make her stay. It's never too late to teach someone how to hate. Oh, virtuous men, strike me down where I stand. Take all that you like, but this is mine. Was the moment that you lost your head, and how glorious the evening she finally fled with the crows. How wise you are to determine a fate that was not yours to choose, it was not yours to make, just the crows.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here tonight with Gabriel Lynch.
Hello.
So throughout your career, there's been 5 albums, and a brand new kind of released single album with 2 songs on it. So can you talk us through kind of the experiences and how the music has evolved over time?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of stuff has changed. I guess the biggest thing was that in the earlier days, for a very long time, in fact, the way by which I would record an album was that I would save up money. I'd usually work very average, run-of-the-mill customer service type jobs just to kind of get some money in my pocket. I'd save. I'd then hire a studio and an engineer, and I'd go into that studio for a few days with a band.
Yep.
We usually would have rehearsed those songs and made sure we had a good arrangement on them before we ever hit record. And we'd try and get it done as quickly as possible because obviously time was everything. And then after we released whatever it was we were working on, I'd tour until I basically ran out of money, and then I'd start the process again.
Yeah.
But that's, I guess, the biggest thing about the music itself is that it was always in conjunction with bands. So while I was obviously writing the music and obviously making a lot of decisions about the arrangement, what kind of instrumentation I would be using, I was also very heavily dependent upon other players, their own personal influences, their ability level. All these sorts of things came into play. So if you listen through everything I've recorded, you know, there are obviously times where the production, the overall performances started to develop and get a lot better and a lot stronger. And I also got better with every record because you start to know the studio a bit, you start to know what you're looking for. I was very lucky in that I had a couple of records kind of partly sponsored. So I had one album, Passerby Chorale, which isn't as widely available online, but I think you can still find it, which was sponsored by a man named Doug Brady in Melbourne, who worked with a lot of very heavyweight Australian artists, people like Ozzy Crawl and John Farnham.
Wow.
But yeah, then look, I guess as time moved on, coming up to sort of more recent years, I did an album, All of Us, last year at a studio in Malaysia, and it was only through happenstance I happened to meet these guys while I was touring in the region. I was at the time living in Bangkok, but I'd come to the studio before, and they asked me if I'd like to become an MVQ artist, sort of under their publishing arm. And so, again, I was able to move forward with making an album, this time with a bit of a team of people sort of around it, helping on the engineering side and the production side. And I'm actually quite excited to be able to say that as of last week, that album was nominated alongside a couple of other Maverick Records
Fantastic.
For best engineered album in Malaysia in AIM, which is sort of like the Malaysian Grammys, if you will. But anyway, so that was different again. But then you move right up to now, and the biggest difference is because now I work with Maverick, so I've come on here in Malaysia as a full-time composer. So my day job is writing music for commercials and films and this kind of thing. So I had to get trained up basically with production and engineering, at least at a basic level, to be able to produce music from scratch using little more than sort of, you know, computer and whatever instruments I can play. So in my downtime, when I'm not on a job, I can work on my own music. So after having learned some of these skills over the last 18 months since I've been doing it, you now look at Language of the Affair and you look at the B-side, Drink Your Love Away. And I can actually say that these are the first completely self-produced efforts. So there were only hired guns brought in. So on Language of the Affair, obviously, we have a girl named Jennifer Akron, a beautiful Thai singer who came and sang on the track for me. And obviously, we got in a good friend of mine, Tony Parker from the Juni Brothers, to play drums. But actually, everything else you hear on that record, the guitars, obviously the vocals, now, of course, a lot of synthetic elements, so synthesizers and samples and this kind of thing to help fill in the sound. A lot of that, or almost all of it, in fact, all of it really, was produced in my own little studio using my own set of skills. So it's become a bit more personal, which I find very exciting. You know, it's not to say, because I mean, obviously, I think as a musician, collaborating is one of the greatest things that you can ever do, and I certainly still get the opportunity to do that when the timing is right. But I guess it just means now I've got that little bit more strength to my own production skills to be able to really deliver the song the way that I envisaged it. Because sometimes, and it's not a bad thing, but quite often you go into a studio with a band and you've got one concept of how you think the song will end up sounding, and it will come out very different. And often that can be very exciting. But I guess now to be able to realize things the way that you conceive of them, I mean, that for me is very empowering and makes me feel very good about what I'm going to be releasing in the coming years.
Fantastic. So you spoke a little bit about the album All of Us. We're about to hear the first track out of that album, Scarlet. So can you talk us a little bit about the campaign that you did for that album?
Yeah, right. So as I mentioned, it was recorded in Malaysia. Now I was very fortunate by coming under the MVQ Music publishing arm. I didn't have to worry about the cost of a studio as such. It was basically a kind of a partner agreement that we would work on this album collectively.
Yep.
But there was still obviously some overheads that were going to be quite difficult for me to face on my own. Namely that because I was based in Bangkok, and to be able to workshop the songs as I was at that time with bands, I needed to be able to rehearse with some of the instrumentalists I was going to use on the record, and I needed to be able to bring them over here. And that was the most important thing, was just getting backwards and forwards. And there was a lot of flying back and forwards. It's not a long or expensive journey to take, but obviously over enough time it starts to add up.
Yeah.
So I actually did a very humble. I shot for a very humble goal with an Indiegogo campaign. Now that campaign was basically targeting just raising enough money to again fly us back and forth. But the concept behind it was that rather than doing what a lot of artists have done before, which is to say, oh, if you help me raise money for my album, you get a copy or you'll get a signed poster or whatever it was, I wanted to do something a bit different. And I also wanted to sort of challenge myself a little bit. And the way that I did that was to say that, well, if you contributed a certain amount of money, not a large sum, I would write you a song and I would give you at the very bare minimum a very raw, rough performance of that song on YouTube, right? So people were able to suggest any kind of song concept or story. They could choose the title and then I would write it. And so through doing that campaign, I obviously ended up writing a lot of songs. But I also ended up picking a couple as I was sort of in the process of getting underway with the recording. A couple of the songs made it onto the album All of Us as well. So Scarlet was one of them. But funnily enough, Scarlet was a very broad suggestion. The girl who asked me to write a song for her said, look, I don't care what it's about. I just want it to be kind of epic, and I want it to be called Scarlet. So epic was the goal, and Scarlet was the title, and this is kind of what we came up with.
Fantastic. So this is Scarlet for all you guys to listen to now.
Cigarette was the color of his coat. He held a sign and a cup for change that he never seemed to fill. No one saw him standing there, and now no one ever will. The streets call his name. The streets call his name. The carry-on of a group of kids with nothing left to do. They found out where the rainbow ends, dreams really don't come true. But standing there with a scarlet scarf and a heavy heart, it's there. We all hold signs and a cup for change, no one saw us standing there. The streets call our name. The streets call our name.
That was Gabriel Lynch's Scarlet. Just a reminder to all you guys, all of Gabriel's links are down in the description box, so make sure you go and check him out on YouTube and at his store, and make sure you go and support him, guys.
Thank you.
So, let's talk a little bit more about the All of Us campaign that you did. Because I remember very early on in the campaign, you were writing songs like I'd Rather Fly to Mars.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about those kind of songs and like what they were all suggested from?
Yeah, well, look, obviously, not all of the songs would ever make it onto a record.
Yeah.
Some of the song suggestions, well, a lot of them came from very heartfelt places, and I wrote a lot of love songs for a lot of girls about their boyfriends.
Yeah.
And all this kind of stuff. There were some very silly suggestions that came from people who either just happened upon the campaign and thought it would be a bit funny, or like some of my good friends who thought they'd chip in a little bit and maybe make me write something ridiculous. So I'd Rather Fly to Mars was one of them, and the title of the song is pretty ridiculous, but when I asked the guy who requested it to give me the story behind the song, what did it need to be about, he said, "Oh, look, it's about you going to a party and telling everyone there that you want to get into bed with your best friend's mum." And I thought, well, yeah, well that makes perfect sense. So why not? So it was good fun. So I mean, there were a handful of tunes like that were equally ridiculous, and the challenge for me, because I'm not really a comedy writer, but my challenge was to try and make those songs sound as legitimate and sincere as possible. So I mean, funnily enough, lyrical content notwithstanding, some of them actually kind of nice tunes. Now look, not all of them are still easy to find online, although I do from time to time pull out a couple of those tunes when I'm playing a show just for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But certainly, yeah, look, it was a nice change of pace, and that was what was really good about the campaign as well, was because I was writing stuff that I would never usually write, and it was making me, through virtue of that, I was having to broaden my own approach and my own horizons to actually accomplish some of the tasks that I was being given. So yeah, look, a great experience, but yeah, I got to be honest with you, I think most people would probably tend to agree I should stick to what I know best.
We spoke a little bit about the digital age and how that kind of affects music in a little bit. So what kind of advice would you be giving to someone who was trying to jump into the music industry now in 2016?
Look, I guess the advice would be probably much the same as any other time. I mean, there's a couple of key things. One is to really strive for the best that you can do with as far as your own writing, your own performing ability. So obviously, you know, guys who are just starting out with music, I really encourage them to try and be the best that they can be, particularly before they take that step of getting themselves up onto a stage or recording a song, making sure that when they take that first step, they're putting their very best foot forward. So take the time that it requires to become as much of an expert as you can. Whether you're in electronic music and you need to refine your production chops, or if you're a guitarist and you're just picking it up and you need to refine your ability to voice chords or to improvise or whatever it is. I mean, everyone's going to be approaching music differently. Just make sure you're as good as you feel you can be. I mean, you'll always be growing and you'll always be developing, and that never stops. But I do think that's one of the most important starting points. And then look, I guess the other advice I can give is to I think just make sure that you're not putting all of your eggs into one basket. So if you want to survive off music, I think you've got to be realistic, particularly in the early days, and say, well, look, it may not be that I release a song online that becomes an internet sensation and turns me into the next Justin Bieber. So what other ways can you make? What other ways can you survive and make an income out of music? So for me, I've done a bit of everything. You know, I've made money by playing covers in bars, which, while a little bit demoralizing at times, is still a great way to be practicing your performance skills, your singing, your instrumental skills. I've done that. I still do it from time to time. You know, you can do what I do now. You can be a composer. You know, if you get to the point where you're able to write at a certain standard and you're able to write in different styles, not just in the one that you enjoy most, then that's a really exciting way to to earn a living. I mean, there's a million ways you can do it, but I guess the key here is that if you don't just focus on the one thing being your own music and your own art, and you force yourself to try these other things as well, then I think it will overall have an impact on your own art too. I think it will actually improve you. So I think it's just, as a case with a lot of creative people. You meet a lot of people who are creative, who work in like the marketing industry or whatever the case may be. But but behind closed doors, they're an artist, a visual artist, or a filmmaker, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But they've got multiple strings to their bow, and I think that's something that people should be really, really enthusiastic about, trying a bit of everything and not being afraid to have their fingers in a few different pies, because ultimately I think that makes you a better rounded artist, a better rounded musician in this case.
Yeah, for sure. Just with talking about like composing and doing all that kind of stuff now, is producing also something that you would be interested in doing, so you have a lot more control over what happens to your music instead of handing it off to different studios and everything? Would producing your own music be something that you would be interested in getting into the future?
Well, actually, yeah, and as we were saying earlier, look, so the last release I had, Language of the Affair, and the little B-side that went hand in hand with that, were self-produced efforts. Now, they still went through one final stage of being mixed by a professional sound engineer, and then of course mastered as well. But on the production side, that's now something that I take the reins with, and I guess that's cool too, because the other thing that now lends itself to, and you'll be hearing a little bit about in the future, is that I'm now getting the chance to start lending those skills to other aspiring artists here in Malaysia, and I suppose that will potentially branch out as well to other places as well. But yeah, I guess the idea now is that yes, that's something else I do enjoy doing, is actually producing the tracks and getting them, I guess, creating them from scratch. So that is something that I'm very excited to be actually doing, and something that of course is now a new part of my journey. It will continue to develop, of course, but certainly, working with other people on different projects, on their music, on genres that are outside of the sort of the indie pop rock genre that I sort of belong to, that's something that's really exciting for me.
Fantastic. Can you just talk us a little bit, we're about to hear Drink Your Love Away, so can you just talk us through the kind of story behind this? Yeah,
so this is the B-side for Language of the Affair. So this is a song. The title kind of gives away a lot about it. Now, you can interpret that title a couple of different ways. You could say drink your love away, meaning that you drink so that you forget. So you drink alcohol so that you drown your sorrows and you forget about something or someone.
Yeah.
The other way that I like to think of it is that when you do that, when you do drink and you drown your sorrows, it quite often is a great and powerful tool of alienation. You can alienate yourself from other people by doing that. So it actually pushes them away. Your drinking pushes them away from you. And that's what this is actually about. This is about that two-sided effect of drinking. And look, alcohol has been a very big part of my life through some very good things and some very bad things. I wouldn't say it's been the deciding factor of a lot of the things that has happened to me, but it certainly has been a big influence. And that's not to say I'm condemning it or anything like that. I still drink. But I would say it's certainly important to recognize that it's been a big part of my life, for better or for worse. And I was reflecting upon one particularly sad time in my life, where, as the title suggested, I felt I was drinking someone out of my life. And yeah, it was a very difficult, very heartbreaking period.
Yeah.
But it was something that I felt I had to write about. So I can't really say a whole lot more about it, but I hope that gives you kind of a rough overview.
Fantastic. So you guys can listen to Drink My Love Away.
She sits by the window, her shoulders bare, they glisten in the evening light. She cannot keep secrets, or so she says, but then again she often lies. In all of this silence I can't find peace, guilt is a familiar place. And in a reflection she points at me. I cannot stand to see my face. And I'll lose another day. I'll drink my love away. Her eyes never follow me when I leave. Mine are far too insincere. I know that in time all my thoughts will sleep. They will never find me here. And I am so ashamed. I drink my love I'll drink my love away.
Wow. Very strong lyrics there.
Yeah, well, look, it came from a very personal place, but yeah, that song, what I really liked about it was, I mean, it was one of the earliest tunes in the 18 months since I've been in Malaysia. It was one of the first ones that, using that newfound set of skills to be able to record and produce myself, that I actually undertook as a project. So it was very much just using the most bare basic things that I'd come to understand about recording and actually executing that myself.
Yeah.
But it meant that I used the things that I've used my whole life for music making. My guitar and my voice were the centerpiece of it. So that was as much as it's a quite heavy song, it was a very enjoyable thing for me, actually recording that and seeing it come to life. And it was really lovely to be able to share that with people too when we finally released the Language of the Affair single a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you moved over to Bangkok and everything, and you're currently living in Kuala Lumpur. So can you talk about the kind of decision to move from Australia over to Southeast Asia?
Yeah, well, look, it was something I got to tell you, I would never have guessed in my wildest dreams that, if I was asked 10 years ago, I would end up living in this part of the world.
Yeah.
But it had been kind of, I guess, starting to loom as a possibility, because I discovered about probably 5 years ago that it was actually quite a good way to get my music heard and to also survive a little off my music was to tour. So actually going to places outside of Australia. I mean, I used to tour a little bit in Australia as well, but I just never found that it was quite as easy. And now there's a few reasons for that, but I mean, one of them is just the geography involved,
Yeah.
I realized that if I came to a place like Singapore was actually the very first place outside of Australia I performed, and I went there initially just for 1 week. I just went to Singapore. I kind of picked a point on the globe. I had one email for one band booker over there, and then I did a lot of research, and out of that I ended up with a guitar company named Maestro, based out of Singapore, sponsoring me with an instrument. I ended up performing about 5 or 6 nights in Singapore, and look, not making a killing out of it, but I guess at the very least living for a week, surviving for a week, just breaking even on a trip, and I did that purely by playing my own music.
Yeah.
So then I realized, I was quite ignorant, I guess, when I was first venturing out that way. But it occurred to me, if I ever went again, well, gosh, Malaysia is right next door, so I could always go there for a show. And I thought, well, if I'm going there for a show, I mean, why not try some of the other countries nearby? So I ended up trying my luck in Taiwan and in Thailand and in a handful of other places. The Philippines, of course, is one of the places I love to visit. I've been there a few times now. But yeah, it just seemed to me that it was actually quite an efficient way to spread my music to a lot of people, and by just doing that one thing, performing. So that's what started it. And then fast forward to, I guess it would have been 2013, and I ended up meeting someone and fell in love, all the usual stuff. And she happened to be moving to Bangkok to go on a 6-month work contract. And through my travels, I happened to meet somebody who knew somebody else who was the drummer in a house band at a jazz club, and asked me if I could come on board to sing for them. So I thought, well, there we go. We're going to go to Bangkok then. And then after I moved there for what was only initially going to be maybe a short, a few months, I ended up meeting a lot of other musicians, and I sort of fell into the circuit of performers on the hotel and bar scene. And so that became my new bread and butter, my new living.
Yeah.
So in between all that, obviously, I was working on the campaign to record a new album. I was writing. I'd periodically go and I'd perform my own stuff. I'd still do my original performances, but it wasn't happening quite as often as I'd have liked. But then finally the move over to Malaysia, which again was, I guess, as a result of having spent a lot of time in this part of the world, the invitation to come and write for a living for Maverick Studios. That was obviously the biggest incentive I've ever had to go anywhere. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I would have taken, if someone had offered me that job in the Sahara Desert, I would have given it my best shot. But yeah, this is where I ended up, and look, I'll be honest with you, it's a great place to be. I think a lot of people in Australia, the indie scene, would probably be saying, oh, they want to try getting their music heard in the US or the UK or Europe, right? These are sort of the powerhouse music economies.
Yeah.
But the thing is, over in Asia, in Southeast Asia, particularly where I've spent a lot of my time, the thing is there's a huge demand for this stuff. There's a huge demand for original music, and it's now sort of starting to really bubble over with content people who are starting to become independent musicians here. It's not like Melbourne, which has a long history of music wherein there's, I think there must still be probably 50 or 60 bars every night of the week playing original music, right? Over here the scene is not that large. In Kuala Lumpur, let's just talk about Kuala Lumpur for the time being, but same in Bangkok, it's not that large. So the thing is that it's a lot easier to reach people and get people interested in what you're creating. And it's also something that, because it is, I would say, very much in its infancy, the people are paying a lot of attention to. People are excited by it, and people are starting to get involved with it. So the community is starting to grow and starting to blossom. Whereas I guess I could say that, particularly after many, many years of trying to kind of make a name for myself in Melbourne and hitting my head up against a few walls, and not least because the standard is ridiculously high, but also because I guess there's just so much going on. I found it to be very, very rewarding to come to this part of the world and to play here and to make this my new home base. And it's something that I think I'd encourage a lot of indie artists in Australia, or anywhere else for that matter, to consider, because there is an audience here, and there's an audience here who are passionate about good music, whatever the genre, whatever the style. So I'm very, very happy to be able to discover this early on. Yeah. And I'm also very excited because I think as time wears on, I'd like to think we'll see more people coming over here to share their music and build bridges with this part of the world, because let's face it, it really is one of our nearest neighbours as far as where we're located on that. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful place to explore, and they're wonderful people as well. Yeah,
for sure. It's one of the most interesting things I've actually noticed doing this podcast once a month. I go to find original music and a lot of cover music. A lot of it is coming from Southeast Asia. Like a lot of the stuff that I find is straight from Southeast Asia, compared to like the US and Australia and everything. That's where where most of it is coming from on YouTube.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I do think there's a big YouTube, particularly YouTube. YouTube is a big entity over here. And I know they exist, but certainly in the States, and of course, I mean, there are a lot of people who are now sort of making their name as YouTube artists. Yeah. But over here, it's another whole beast, and it's pretty amazing because people really do respond to it. So there are people over here who have hundreds of thousands of followers who once a week or once every now and again will record a cover in their bedroom. and they'll get some attention. I mean, I think it's wonderful. One of the things that I really would like to see probably more is people writing their own original music. Not to say it's not happening, but it doesn't always get as much attention. I think the covers thing is a great way to get people to notice, because obviously if you're playing a well-known enough song, maybe if you're a bit of a cute-looking person as well, that can certainly help your cause. Sadly, I don't have that going for me. I'm not the most attractive man in the world. But the thing is, it's just using using whatever resources you've got. But yeah, I mean, it's something that is really quite amazing over here, and there are artists who've built their entire careers out of doing. I guess it's what sort of people like Justin Bieber pioneered, right? Like kind of almost YouTube celebrity.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, you're right. There's a lot of stuff that's happening here, and I would argue there might not be quite as much support for local music in any of the places I've lived so far as there is in a place like Australia. But again, I would put that down to the fact that it's still very much something that's new and something that that hasn't had enough time to sort of mature into a commonplace thing. Yeah. But it's great. It's a time to be in Asia, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We have a couple of... I've asked people to tweet at me questions if they had any questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one comment on the stream from Nicole. She wishes you the very best and good luck with your music.
Oh, thank you, Nicole.
And there's a tweet from @BobbyBoy65 who wants to know how important making contacts is. It says, I'm very interested in getting into the music scene. How important is it to make contacts and connections?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, it's that old adage, right? Like, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Look, I would say this. I've never really been the kind of guy to go around making contacts for the sake of making contacts. I come across it every now and again. There are the dudes that walk into an event and have their business cards on hand, and we'll pass them to absolutely anyone they can do so, and we'll take as many business cards as they can. That kind of old school idea of networking.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I certainly think there's merit in doing that, and don't get me wrong. I mean, it's important to have your card on hand in case. But I've never been as much about that as I have been about just being, I guess, among people who I find have a similar mentality. And what's been really exciting for me, like I'll tell you the most valuable contacts I've ever made.
Yep.
They weren't people in record labels. They weren't people on the business side or people who were able to, get me on radio or whatever, that kind of stuff. It was actually the people I ended up collaborating with. So if I look at the Language of the Affair song I just released, now this is a song, again, I produced it myself. I was lucky because I had the contact with the studio in Malaysia. How did I make that contact? I actually was over here performing, and I asked somebody to help me find an artist who could be my sort of supporting artist on the night. Her name was Froya. Froya is also a composer here at Maverick. Now, that's gone back 6 years ago. And so when we did the show, her bosses and her colleagues happened to come to that show. And I guess just through virtue of, having a chat and getting to know them all a little bit, found out about the studio, ended up coming and visiting it. And there's the greatest ever contact I ever made, but it came from just friendliness and just getting on and realizing that these guys had a similar kind of vision for music as I did.
Wow.
But then moving forward to actually producing the video, producing the song. So Jenny Lachran was just a girl who was playing on the scene in Bangkok, and I loved her voice. And so I heard her sing, and then eventually we ended up doing some gigs together. And then I eventually said, would you like to sing on a song that I've written? There you go. She's contributed her voice to that song. The guy who did the video is another friend of a friend who's a budding filmmaker who's really passionate about film, also loves his music, heard the song, and really wanted to be a part of making it happen. And so all of a sudden it became this collaborative project. And because of that, I guess the world of networking for me is I think it's about keeping good company. That's what I guess I'm getting down to. It is important. Getting a good contact can be the thing that helps to boost you and get you that interview in that magazine or that placement on that radio station. That certainly plays a part, and getting your music out there to those people is very, very important. But I think you'd be amazed how organically that happens when you keep the right company. And I think that means also making an effort to go and see other musicians perform, to support other people who are doing what you're doing, getting to know who's part of your community, because you'd be amazed just how many people. I mean, that steps of separation thing is totally true.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everyone, so I think that's what I would be saying. Networking is important, but I would approach it less like a businessman and more as somebody who just wants to give back to a community.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to hear another song, which is going back to Passerby Chorale. The song The Final Thread. Can you talk us through a little bit of what was going on in your life during writing this?
Well, would you believe it, and anyone who listens to it might be able to tell, this is a breakup song, so I was going through a breakup. But yeah, look, it was my first ever real breakup song, because it was probably the most significant breakup I'd had at that point in my life. I was still incredibly young, and I was a very troubled young man as well. But we went into the studio. I'd originally written it on guitar. At the time, I was working with a wonderful singer-songwriter from Singapore named Charlie Lim. He was playing keyboard for me in my band.
Yep.
And so I asked him if he could help me come up with a piano arrangement. He plays very beautiful piano. I play a little bit, but not quite as beautifully as he does. So that's what we did. We went into the studio. I put my guitar down. We got in a cello and a violin as well to kind of bolster the song. And really, this is a performance from myself and from that incredible, he's an incredible singer. You don't hear him sing on this song, unfortunately, but Charlie Lim, if you don't know him, a Singaporean artist who was in Australia for a long time. Beautiful, beautiful musician and well worth listening to. But yeah, this is the song, The Final Thread.
Yep. We're going to listen to it now.
I remember the stories they used to tell me long before I met you. All the endings intended to leave you a smile and the feeling that it might be true. That's the thing that roped me in, but now I wish I knew we are on our final thread. We've been holding on too long, slipping now, and I suppose it's easier to just let go. So before my bones turn numb, and in case we change our minds, well, if I don't want to, I don't have to say goodbye. So take care of yourself and pay no attention to anything they'll say to you, except for those words that are brimming with love, and that hearing helps to get you through. All you need now isn't me, and that's all I need too. Our final thread, we've been holding on too long, slipping now, and I suppose it's easier to just let go. So before my bones turn numb, and in case we change our minds, well, if I don't want to, I don't have to say goodbye. Suddenly the breeze, it's blowing the other way. The ground, it's shifting now. The earth, it's shifting down beneath the angry sea. It's waiting breath. We've been holding on too long, slipping now in ice and pause. It's easier to just let go. So before my bones turn numb, and in case we change our minds, well, if I don't want to, I don't have to say goodbye. No, I still don't want to, but I have to say goodbye.
Wow. I have to actually tell you something. This was the tour. You were actually around touring Passerby Chorale, and that was the first time that I actually heard you play.
Yes, it would have been. I recall meeting you back in those days. Yes,
It was.
It was.
At the Eco Force concert.
Goodness me, that's right. Oh, wow, that takes me back. Yeah, so it goes to show, I mean, a lot of time has passed. I mean, gosh, that must have been 2011, 2000, maybe even earlier, 2010, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going back a long way.
I was thinking of it the other day. I was just like, wow. It's been that long since I actually first heard you play.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm glad that you're still listening, mate. It does mean a lot.
Alright, we're gonna move straight on to our next song, which comes from All of Us again, Little One Goodnight. Can you explain a little bit the story behind this?
Yep. So again, this was another tune from the campaign. Now, this one was a very difficult one to write because of the subject matter. A lady who I did not know personally, she was a person who discovered my campaign online and wanted to have a song written in honor of it, for her daughter, I should say. Her daughter was suffering with an inoperable brain tumor and was very young, and obviously her prognosis was very uncertain. And it was very tough for me. I mean, I at first had asked her to just tell me as much about her daughter as she could to help me to try and paint a picture of her. But it just occurred to me that, I was never going to be able to do it true justice without really getting to know this girl and without being able to meet them. I mean, even if I did that, to be able to try and capture her and her relationship with her mother, it was going to be a very tall order. So I opted to do something which I thought might resonate with any parent and also with potentially any child, and that was to write just a simple lullaby.
Yeah.
So I went into the studio to record this, and initially I'd conceived of doing it as an acoustic number with guitar and a couple of strings and a French horn, and we tried a version of it like that, but for me it wasn't capturing that intimacy and particularly the intimacy of the lyrics. So it ended up being a vocal-only a cappella arrangement. So it's very different from anything else I'd recorded up until that point. But yeah, I hope you guys do like it.
All right, let's have a listen.
Little one, good night. May joyful pictures fill your mind. Little one, sleep tight. It's time to leave this day behind, and may you dream of what may be, of every wish made real. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Little one, your blessed. There's so much love surrounding you. Sorrow we forget. We don't surrender to the groove. And come what may, I'll be to greet you when you wake. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.
Well, I don't know about you, but if that's not doing it justice, I don't know what is.
Oh well, you can only try your best, and that's what I did in this case. But yeah, no, I do. I find that to be a very special song, and I love performing it. And I've done a few versions of it on stage with other singers.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll be performing that song at the AIM showcase. That's that awards that I mentioned here in Malaysia. And I'll be inviting a few of the very best singers I know in town to join me for a version of it. But yeah, it's a lovely song to perform, and it's also lovely because you can do it so many different ways. But that's what it was all about, just keeping it simple. And I certainly tried my best to do that. So yeah.
Well, good job, and good luck with the award. I hope you actually get it. It's fantastic.
Oh, we'll see what happens, mate. But look, I was very, very, very touched to have even been nominated, and particularly as somebody who's only been here for 18 months, I thought that was a very lovely gesture on their part to allow me to even be considered for it. So that's wonderful.
We have some more questions coming in. We have 2 questions from Jane Webster. The first one is, Gabriel, where did you get your inspiration for your song Jordana?
Ah, okay. Well, Jordana is actually a very personal song about something that I've dealt with my whole life, which is, well, I guess to tell it very simply, I'm what you would class as well, I've suffered with depression for a long time. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And that was a song about my constant sort of struggle, kind of switching between sort of sometimes week by week, month by month, very, very intense stages of quite crippling depression, and then of course on the converse side, somewhat of a mania, where I would have these incredible bursts of energy, and perhaps wasn't always that rational. When I was really young, it troubled me a lot, and it probably led me to behave in ways that I would never dream of behaving nowadays. So it had a lot of very serious consequences. Now, I say all this because I had to really learn to come to understand what depression was, and I had to get help with dealing with that. And it's been it's an ongoing process, and it's something that comes in and out of my life regularly. And I know a lot of other people who have got similar problems and afflictions. So that song Jordana was very much talking about what it is to be aware of yourself as you're slipping into a one state or another, depressed or a manic state, and sort of not necessarily being able to stop it, but just being able to observe it and trying to find hope in the fact that at the very least I was becoming aware of it. The awareness was actually one of the very biggest steps I underwent when trying to deal with it, because I think a lot of people suffer with this and they don't realize, and without being aware, it's entirely crippling. You can feel like you're absolutely helpless. So So that was probably one of the very first steps of the journey, and that's when I wrote that song, and that's what the song was about.
Also, interesting title. The word Jordana in Latin actually means to be descending or to be falling down. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of choice for words.
Well, look, I didn't. I must confess that for me, it didn't come from the Latin meaning, although someone else later pointed that out to me too. For me, it was about personifying it. I mean, in some religious texts and stuff, the River Jordan is a very important river, has a lot of significance, and I was drawing upon that significance and then personifying it into a woman, because I kind of, for some reason, that whole process of being aware of my own mental state, for some reason I really almost ascribed a feminine quality to that, almost like a person, an independent body that was helping me to observe that. I know that sounds a little bit batty, but it was, for some reason, the way that I was thinking about it. So that for me was where the title came from. And then, yeah, when I found out about the Latin meaning, as you just pointed out, I found that to be quite appropriate as well.
Yeah, for sure. That was actually, Jordana was the first song I actually heard you perform live. There's a version of this up on YouTube still. I think it's called Gabriel Lynch Eco Force Rehearsals, which I highly recommend you go and check out. But it was you playing acoustically in this church, and the way that it was kind of bouncing off the walls, it just made it sound so full and kind of complete, even with one guitar and one voice.
You know, I forgot about that video until you just mentioned it. But yeah, look, and it was quite literally the first time I ever performed the song. So the little video came from the rehearsal and the sound check that we did earlier in the day. And that evening when you saw the show, that was the very first time I played it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Jane also would like to know, when you're writing songs, which one comes first, the lyrics or the melody?
Look, you can approach songs a number of different ways. I've talked to people about this at some length, because I think songwriting is something that people don't realize. You have to really practice it. It's kind of, it's the same as anything else in life. You have to practice it. And the only way to practice it is to keep on doing it. But I guess over my time, I've realized that you can approach it by starting at one of, I guess, 4, maybe 5 key points. So you can start with just a groove, so like maybe a rhythmic idea. You can start with just chords. You can start with just melody. You can start with just lyrics. Now, for me, my instinct has always previously been to start with a chord progression, usually a chord progression and some kind of groove. You know, for me, I'm very much about harmony. I love harmony, and I'm excited by it, which is why I guess, you know, my music has developed in a certain way, because I've always been really fascinated by chord movements, and, you know, experimenting with those and voicings and trying to play unconventional chord progressions. But I would start with chords often, and then I would build a melody on top of that. Lyrics are, generally speaking, the last thing I write. Having said that, though, there have been numerous situations over the years where I've had to go the other way. I've had to start with lyrics, and I've had to find a melody and a rhythm that fits those lyrics. But look, I think everyone's different. Everyone has a different preference. I've met plenty of people who start with lyrics because they find that that's the way they get their idea out best. For me, I do like to try and challenge myself by starting at a different point as often as I can. But when it comes to just sheer expression, I find, for me, a song will tell me what it's going to be about when I hear the chords and the melody in combination together for the first time. I'll usually start to feel what it's about, and that drives the lyrics rather than the other way around. But it is a great challenge to approach it from the other direction, and I think anyone who's writing should really experiment it. If it's outside of your comfort zone, just try it, because it really does, again, open you up, and it makes you consider things in a very different way than when you stick inside of your own comfort zone.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you guys for sending in your questions. Keep them coming, and we'll probably ask a couple more as we go. We are going to move on to our next song, which is Another Apology off the Dependent State album. So could you talk us a little bit about what this song is about?
Yeah, so this record, the 3 tracks on the record are all quite different from one another. So we heard Like Crows earlier. But Another Apology, I wrote about a sort of a funny habit I've had throughout my life, which is to apologize for things almost compulsively. And a lot of that was stuff that I was responsible for, don't get me wrong, but also apologizing for things that were entirely out of my own control. And realizing too, as time wore on, that if you apologize a lot, people start to inherently think of you as the bad guy. I mean, it's just a funny thing. Or if you say you're sorry to somebody, they can sometimes almost they can almost begin to feel like you were the culprit, even if you weren't. That's a bit of a weird one, but the song actually came from that sentiment. And then we ended up making a video, and it was kind of my attempt to try and make peace with that habit, to try and like just leave it behind once and for all. Not to turn into like the stoic Frank Sinatra thing where, he claimed to never apologize.
Yeah.
But just sort of accepting what was my responsibility and letting go of what was not. But we invited people to come and make their own apologies in front of a camera, by writing them and showing them to the camera, and it was wonderful. I had a lot of good friends and a few strange faces as well that I feel I didn't know, who came and took part in the video, and I thought that was really lovely. So if you haven't seen it, obviously I'd encourage your listeners to check that out on YouTube. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a background about what the song is about anyway.
Yeah, and as Gabriel said, go and check out this music video, because it's very simplistic, but that makes it so much better, I think, with the way that it was done.
Well, it was a very simple idea, and I mean, oftentimes with any of the videos I've made over the years, we've had to choose a concept that would be easy to deliver without compromising too much on quality. But I mean, yeah, it doesn't get a whole lot simpler than this. It's just a bunch of people apologizing on camera, which was a really lovely thing.
Yeah. So here's another apology.
All the things that are behind me circle round until I'm numb. But could it be
Yeah, good song. You were speaking just before we played that song about the Dependent State album and the tracks being really different from each other. I think it was very interesting. You had a song that was about apologizing, and then a song about kind of breaking free and doing what you want with your life.
Mm.
And then with What Friends Are For, I think you've said before that it's about murdering people.
Yes, yeah, it was a very different thing. Look, I mean, it was almost a bit of an in-joke for me. Well, I found it funny. I guess I don't know if anyone else did, but I was at the time starting to hit my head against the wall with what sort of things I wanted to write about, and I was writing about personal things a lot, which is really a very important outlet for me. But it can also be quite exhausting.
Yeah.
I'm always looking inward for inspiration, and I mean, there are things in my life too that obviously even though they seem like a profound idea for a song or concept for a song, for whatever reason I just can't create the tune that I think will tell the story well enough, or whatever it may be. So I was listening to a Nick Cave album at the time called Murder Ballads, and I'm not the biggest Nick Cave fan in the world by any stretch, but after hearing that album and then doing a bit of research and finding out that Murder Ballad actually is an entire subgenre of music in itself, sort of going back to the days of the old blues.
Yeah.
They in the very early infancy of the guys playing blues guitar, they would write about typically women, alcohol, or murders, and the murders are kind of they're usually told in a narrative sort of style. A very famous murder ballad that a lot of people would know is the song that was later made into sort of a swing. A popular swing song was Mac the Knife, and I mean that's a very interesting song for me, because if you listen to it, I mean by any modern ears it would sound like a very upbeat, jovial kind of song, but it just tells the story verse by verse of this guy who comes into some town and one by one starts sort of picking off some of the town's inhabitants.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use that as kind of the template of a song. So I decided to write a song, which I guess is quite literally about somebody moving into what I imagine to be some sort of very isolated country house, going crazy and then murdering his wife. So that's what it's about. And the title was a bit of a play on obviously the idea of what the song was about, what friends are for.
Yeah.
But it's also a very important part of the lyrics, where this guy is I guess essentially talking to the demons in his house or in his own head. So yeah.
We're going to do one more question from Twitter, which comes from Jeff Jeffries, who wants to know what influenced you to go into the music industry, and who are some of the people that you look up to in the music industry?
Well, look, I decided really early on that I had a real love with music. So when I was a kid, my parents observed that I really loved singing. I'd been taking violin, I think, sort of as I was encouraged to take it as a young boy when I was about 4 years old by my parents, who were both very knowledgeable scholars of classical music. But they noticed that I loved singing, so I ended up in a choir.
Yeah. Not
too long after that. And it was around the time I was 8 years old, I asked my dad if I could have an electric guitar for my birthday. And my dad, being a classical guitarist, had taught me the only thing that he thought might be relevant to me, because I was clearly showing an interest in pop music at the time. So he taught me the three chords that comprise the 12-bar blues, or the three most basic chords you can play in a blues.
Yeah.
And I started writing songs with those. So, but I guess, yeah, that was sort of around that time. Now, who were the influences back then? I'd actually be really hard-pressed to tell you. I think at the time I was listening to, my brother had what would have been the very first 100% hits cassette tape, which would have had songs on it by people like Aerosmith. I remember it had the theme song from the movie White Men Can't Jump, probably a couple of boy bands. I mean, it was a real mix and match. And there was a rock band on there called Ugly Kid Joe. And I don't know if anyone would even remember those guys, but they did a rendition of Cats in the Cradle which was a very, very popular song back in its time.
Yeah.
But they played very sort of, I would say, sort of petulant, youthful kind of rock music, but it really connected with me for some reason. So I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to play rock music, and then fast forward a few years later, and I heard the song "No Surprises" by Radiohead when I was about 11 years old for the very first time. It just happened to be playing on a television somewhere when I was a kid, and I heard it, and it was the first time I heard a rock song that sounded sweet and beautiful and kind of sad, but yeah, almost like a lullaby.
Yeah.
And I realized that you could make beautiful music. You could make beautiful sounding music that was still rock music or pop music, and that was one of the biggest, I guess, revelations that occurred to me when I was that age. So Radiohead has always been an influence. I think everyone says that though, so it's not really fair to sort of say, "Oh, Radiohead are an influence." But you know, that moment, I guess, was a big changing point for me, hearing that song. But then, you know, look, I've always for some reason favored music from sort of the Britpop world. So when I was around that age, I started to become very interested in bands like Blur. Later on, I became very interested in a band called Elbow, who are one of my favorites. But then I got very interested in singer-songwriters. People like Ben Folds, who I think is one of the master songwriters of this generation, an incredible pianist as well, but he's at times very matter-of-fact way of storytelling through his lyrics, and I find his composing style to be quite traditional, but also just endlessly listenable. And then there's another guy by the name of, he calls himself Eels, or E is his own personal moniker, but he has a band which is always changing called Eels. Yeah. And I find that he has some similarities to Ben Folds in his lyrical style at different times. But I also love the fact that he is also a bit of a master of reinvention. He's done a lot of different sort of sounding records.
Yeah.
Much like Beck too, you know, every record is something a little bit different. And when he tours, this was one thing that he was a big influence on me, was I realized I didn't have to play my records like they sound on the album. I can take songs and I can perform them in entirely different arrangements, entirely different ways when I'm on stage. So he often comes out and he tours, and last time I saw him, he had a 4-piece rock band with him, playing almost like garage rock style versions of his tunes. Before that, I saw him come out playing with only a string quartet and a percussionist who was playing on a garbage bin. That was, you know, another way to present a lot of the same songs. But yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of different guys, but certainly I would say those are some of the key influences in my musical life anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you guys so much for sending in your questions. We are going to move on to another song, Nothing Else, which comes from your Wyvern Armstrong album. Mm-hmm. So can you give us a little bit of backstory for this?
Yeah, Nothing Else. It's just a simple sort of song. I wrote this sort of for a friend who at the time was in a predicament whereby he wasn't sure if he was going to leave a relationship that he was in. And I mean, obviously it's never anyone else's place to make those decisions for you. But as an outsider looking in, it looked to me almost like it wasn't that he wanted to be in the relationship anymore, but he was afraid to leave it.
Yeah.
And I thought about the times in my life where I've been in that position as well. So this is about that. It's about, you know, not being afraid to be alone, but certainly also not allowing that to be your only reason to remain involved with someone with whom you may have fallen out of love. So yeah, that's what this is about.
Yeah, fantastic. And remember, guys, you can go down to the description box, and all of Gabriel's links are down there, to his store, to his website, to his Facebook page. Everything's there. So please go and support him. He's fantastic.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's hard to let go. Your mind and your heart don't match. But how could you possibly know what's right when you're in that patch of doubt? sense at all to anyone else. So except there's nobody you can call who'll say what you want to hear, but you forgot. Everybody been where you are now. So why do you do these things to yourself? And what do you prove by dragging it out? 'Cause you had, they had, and together you've got nothing else. You've got nothing else. Ever makes it okay to leave all that pain behind. Surely the longer you stay within it, the harder you will find moving on. See this as the door of something that's different, something you could want. So why do you do these things to yourself? What do you prove by dragging it out? 'Cause you had, they had, and together you've got nothing else. There's a novel, there's a new life that is waiting for you to fill its pages with. That the one you love was never meant to
Fantastic. It's interesting for me to listen to these songs back, especially Nothing Else and Another Apology, because those songs have become the most requested songs on my channel for the outros that I do.
Oh, really? Well,
Those
there you
two are
go.
the most requested songs.
Well, that's very flattering to know.
So we are just about to wrap up here, but first off, Gabriel, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it, man.
No, thanks so much for having me. It means a lot. Thanks to the guys who submitted their questions as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at the statistics now. We've had over 100 people come in and out of this live stream.
Oh, lovely. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for listening. It really does mean a lot to know somebody's listening to me rattle on about the thing I love most. So that's great.
Just before we do go, Gabriel, what's coming up for you? What can we look forward to in the next year or so?
All right. Well, I guess the key thing is there'll be quite a bit more music coming out. So before too long, there'll be another single or maybe even a couple. I would expect in the next 6 months.
Yep.
There'll be a bit of touring that will happen off the back of that. So I'm hoping that what you'll hear is that I'll be coming back to Australia.
Fantastic.
I might be making my first inroads over in the United States, but certainly over here in Southeast Asia, I'll be paying some visits to some of the countries nearby, and that will be a lot of fun. And also some collaborations too. So there are some amazing artists over here that I'll be working closely with, both on my own music as well as helping to sort of help guide them into creating some of their own, which will be very, very cool. So
yeah.
A lot of stuff, but certainly if you follow me on my Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you'll hear all about it. And it's going to be a pretty exciting time. Oh, I should also mention the other thing which is happening in the very near future.
Yep.
Is that my voice and my lyrics were featured on a movie that will be released in Thailand in the next couple of weeks, called From Bangkok to Mandalay. So I didn't write the music, but I was actually asked to write some lyrics and to sing on a couple of songs from the movie soundtrack. And it's a beautiful film, which I believe is going to be featured in some of the international film festivals. So wherever you are, if you check it out, From Bangkok to Mandalay, it will be a really wonderful film to see. And I'm really excited to be a part of that.
Fantastic. Looks like you're very busy at the moment.
Good times, yeah.
Again, guys, as Gabriel said, Facebook, Twitter, all of his links are down in the description box to his website, to his store. If you guys like what you're hearing, please go and purchase. Please go and support him.
At the very least, if you have Spotify where you are, make sure you follow me, because that's where you'll be hearing a lot of the new music I'm releasing in the coming months.
Fantastic. We do have one more song, which is Language of the Affair. So can you give us a little bit of backstory to this one?
Yeah, so this is the newest single. We just released it a few weeks ago. It's a song which features a beautiful vocal performance from a singer named Jennifer Lachran, who has her own group in Thailand called Jenny and the Scallywags. This song also came from that campaign I ran a few years ago. In fact, we tried at that time to record it for the album I released last year, but the rendition we recorded, I just didn't feel it was capturing the essence of what the song was about. But the story behind the song was somebody had written to me anonymously and told me about this affair that they'd been the other woman in, I guess. So she had been involved with a married man. It was quite a sordid story. It was also very sad, and I guess the outcome of it was quite heartbreaking and quite tragic in a lot of ways. So I decided to write the song as a duet. So it's kind of like a character play. I'm like the married man, and Jennifer is portraying the mistress in the story, and just kind of discussing, I guess, as much as we're singing to each other in the song, but sort of the internal dialogue of the conflict that's going on, and kind of the effect that this whole affair has taken on our characters. So it was a different kind of song for me to write. It's also the first time I've released a duet, so pretty exciting in that respect. But also my first fully self-produced effort, meaning that this was basically it was conceived and produced inside of my own studio here at Maverick, from the very ground up, which makes it perhaps one of the most personal songs I've ever recorded in that respect.
Yeah. If you guys haven't gone and checked out the video to Language of the Affair, highly recommend you go over to Gabriel's channel and check that out when this is done. And thank you to everyone that's been here watching, and thank you to everyone that's listening on iTunes and SoundCloud as well. And thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you guys have a great evening. I hope you stay tuned to what I'm doing, and I'm hoping I might bump into all of you at some stage in the coming year.
Fantastic. See ya.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
I want you here tonight. I want you here tonight. The city sleeps below, so no one needs to know. Together, far out of sight. Oh, I want you here tonight.
I want you in my arms. I want you in my arms. The cool air chills my skin. Oh, why is warmth a sin? My heart won't sound its alarm, so I want you in my arms.
Each word is a knife that we lust for. Perhaps when they cut us we feel more. The pain is oh so sublime. Loveless but lovers we're falling, but guilt and regret keep on calling. There's no way out till you're mine.
I want you on your knees. I want you on your knees. Your will is mine to break. Your love is mine to take. This body is yours, so if you please. Oh, I want you on your knees.
I want you
Can't I
in my
think
bed.
straight? She knows
I want you
belongs to
in my bed.
and so why we dance this wicked dance? I cannot fight it. My fate's decided.
Desire that leads the deepest red. Oh, I want you in my bed. Each word is a knife that we lust for. Perhaps when they cut us we feel more. The pain is oh so sublime. Loveless but lovers we're falling, but guilt and regret keep on calling. There's no way out till you're mine. There's no way out till you're mine. I want you.
I want you.
I want you.
I want you.